Wings on the push. Segrist in the paint, around and won't go. There's Smith trailing. Oh, and moving without the ball. There's James, the rookie.
The golden afternoon sun filtered softly through the hospital windows, casting long streaks of warmth across the polished floors of the University of Iowa Children's Hospital, as Caitlin Clark walked quietly down the familiar pediatric corridor with Kate Martin at her side, her heart heavier than anyone around her could have guessed. For though to the world this was simply another community visit, a chance for a beloved athlete to bring smiles to young faces, for Caitlin it was a deeply personal journey into the halls that had shaped her long before she became the name on everyone's lips, the prodigious basketball star whose three-pointers and competitive fire had captured a nation's imagination. Yet here, within these walls, she was not Caitlin Clark the icon, but Caitlin the child who once fought battles most people never knew. The battles she had buried beneath success and trophies. And as her steps echoed against the corridor, she could almost feel the ghosts of her past. Rising to meet her, the antiseptic air mingling with a faint aroma of cafeteria food, a sensory detail that pulled her back into memories she had worked so hard to keep pressed down, and Kate, ever observant, noticed the tremor in her fingers, the unusual quietness in her friend's demeanor, whispering gently, "You okay?" To which Caitlin nodded with a practiced smile, though her eyes betrayed the turmoil stirring deep within. The first room they entered was painted in delicate pastels, designed to soften the harshness of hospital life, and filled with the tender sounds of laughter punctuated by the rhythmic beeping of medical monitors. And there sat 7-year-old Emma, propped up in bed, her bald head wrapped in a colorful bandana patterned with tiny basketballs, her eyes sparkling with the irrepressible light of childhood joy despite the toll of months of treatment, her small voice rising in awe as she asked, "Are you really Caitlin Clark?" A question at once innocent and piercing, for in that moment Emma was not simply meeting a sports star. She was reaching out for hope personified. Caitlin approached slowly, her smile outwardly calm but her chest tightening, and replied warmly, "I am, and you must be Emma. I hear you're a pretty amazing basketball player yourself." Emma's face brightened, fatigue melting briefly into delight as she whispered that she used to play before she got sick, that perhaps she could play again one day when she got better. And then, with the raw courage only children can summon, she asked the question that landed like a blow to Caitlin's core. "Do you ever get scared?" It was the kind of question that stripped away facades, that reached beyond the celebrity, beyond the athlete, cutting to the humanity that bound them, and Caitlin's breath caught, her composure wavering in a way Kate had never witnessed before she admitted softly, "Sometimes." "What about you? Do you get scared?" Emma nodded solemnly, answering, "Every day. But my mom says brave people aren't the ones who don't get scared. They're the ones who do the right thing even when they're terrified. She says she learned that from watching you play." At this, Emma reached out, her small fingers curling into Caitlin's hand, a gesture of such trust that it unlatched a door Caitlin had long held shut, releasing a flood of memories that crashed over her like a tide. Suddenly, she was no longer the poised young woman sitting at a child's bedside, but an 8-year-old girl lying in a bed just 3 floors above this one, her body frail, her future uncertain, fighting against a rare blood disorder that threatened to end her basketball dreams before they had even begun, her nights filled with the sound of machines, her mother sleeping in an uncomfortable chair by her side, her father sneaking in basketballs to set up makeshift shooting games with the rubbish. Then, both parents clinging to hope while doctors quietly murmured doubts about whether she would ever be strong enough for competitive sport. Yet it was in those long nights and fragile mornings that Caitlin had forged the promise that defined her life, that if she ever got the chance to play, if she ever truly recovered, she would never forget where she had come from or the battles that shaped her resilience. In those same days, one figure stood out even more than the shadows of fear. Dr. Sarah Chin, the pediatric oncologist whose compassion had gone far beyond medicine, a woman who had not only treated Caitlin but who had encouraged her to channel her fear into movement, into the rhythm of the ball against the floor, transforming basketball into both therapy and sanctuary, teaching her that strength was not the absence of fear, but the decision to keep moving despite it. And as Caitlin remembered, Dr. Chen's steady eyes and soothing voice, She felt Emma's tiny hand anchoring her to the present, reminding her that history does not repeat merely as pain but also as connection, as threads weaving between generations of patients and survivors. Emma's words, "My mom says you're the strongest person she's ever seen play basketball, that you never give up," struck Caitlin with bittersweet irony, for here was a child whose courage eclipsed anything the hardwood could demand, telling her she was strong, when in truth it was Emma who embodied strength in its purest form, facing daily uncertainty with a smile that lit up her fragile frame. It was then Caitlin understood the paradox of human connection, that so often we believe we are entering someone's world to inspire, to lift them, only to find that they are the ones offering us a mirror to our truest selves, showing us where we come from and why we are here. The hospital corridor outside seemed to fade, the hum of equipment dulling to a hush, as Caitlin leaned closer, her voice thick with emotion, whispering to Emma, "Can I tell you a secret?" And in the widening of the child's eyes, in the breathless anticipation only children bring to the promise of a secret, Caitlin felt something shift inside her, the merging of past and present, of pain and purpose, a reminder that sometimes the ones who need us most are also the ones who save us, drawing out the hidden stories we thought we had buried forever. And in that quiet Tuesday afternoon, surrounded by pastel walls and beeping machines, Caitlin Clark realized that her journey was not only about basketball, not only about records or victories, but about carrying forward the courage once given to her and passing it on to those who needed to hear, perhaps more than anyone else, that even in fear...
Getting eliminated last season in the playoffs. Carrington dodging one defender, and the first points of this preseason going to the wings, and DJ trying to build chemistry.
The quiet of the pediatric ward seemed to hold its breath as Caitlin Clark sat at the bedside of young Emma, the walls painted in soft colors that tried to disguise the reality that here, hope was often the most precious currency of all. And as Caitlin looked into the girl's tired but sparkling eyes, she felt the weight of her own unspoken truth pressing forward until, almost in a rush, afraid that if she hesitated, she might lose the courage to speak, she admitted, "When I was about your age, I was a patient in this hospital too." And Emma, her voice filled with innocent wonder, asked, "Really? You were sick like me?" And Caitlin nodded, the tears beginning to blur her vision as she confessed, "Really sick, and I was scared every single day. But there's a doctor here, Dr. Chin, who told me something I've never forgotten. She said that sometimes our biggest challenges become our greatest strengths, but only if we choose to use them to help others." What Caitlin did not say, though the memory was vivid in her heart, was that in those endless nights of uncertainty, she had made a promise to herself, a vow that if she ever recovered and achieved her dream of becoming a professional athlete, she would return to help the children who faced battles like hers. Yet life had swept her into a whirlwind of fame, endorsements, travel, and relentless schedules that pushed that childhood vow to the background until this very moment, when the sight of Emma's courage pulled it back into the light. Kate Martin, standing quietly by, watched her friend with awe, seeing the polished exterior of the public Caitlin Clark dissolve before her eyes, revealing not the superstar, but the vulnerable little girl who had once lain terrified in these very halls. And in that revelation, Kate recognized something profound and deeply human. Then Emma, her face suddenly alight with excitement, said, "Dr. Chin still works here. She's my doctor too. She talks about you sometimes. She says you're proof that miracles happen in this place every day." And Caitlin felt the words strike her like lightning, for the idea that the very woman who had carried her through her darkest days was still here, still giving hope, was almost too much to comprehend. "Would you like to see her?" Emma asked innocently, her tone suggesting she was offering the most natural gift in the world. And before Caitlin could even form a reply, a familiar voice echoed softly from the doorway. "I thought I heard a familiar laugh in here." And Caitlin turned to see Dr. Sarah Chin, now in her 60s, the years etched on her face, yet her eyes and smile as kind and radiant as Caitlin remembered, and for a heartbeat time seemed to collapse, erasing the decades between a frightened 8-year-old and the woman she had become. "Caitlin," Dr. Chin said warmly, stepping into the room with a mixture of wonder and recognition. "My goodness, look at you. and the embrace that followed between them was raw, tearful, and unguarded. A reunion of souls who had once walked through the fire together, while Emma, wide-eyed, grasped instinctively that she was